Hello, everyone, and welcome back once again to the Tetracast. This is RPG Site's weekly podcast where we get the site staff together to talk about our favorite genre of video games. My name is Brian Vitale. Joining me, I've got James Galizio.
Hey, folks.
Adam Vitale.
Hello.
And Chow Min Wu.
How's it going?
Welcome back, everyone. We don't have Josh today. It is simultaneously a birthday in the family that he's celebrating, and he is troubleshooting some computer issues. So hopefully we'll get him back next week. If you listen back to the podcast from last week, we had a huge rundown of all the news that came out of Gamescom, and there's a few things that we'll be tidying up here at the following week, things that we just quite missed on the last podcast. And we're kind of in the gap between Gamescom, which was last week, and in 2 weeks from now, we have Tokyo Game Show. So not next week's podcast, but I believe in 2 weeks from now, it'll literally be like during day 3 or 4 of Tokyo Game Show. And in the last couple of days, a lot of the publishers have just started to detail what their streaming events are, what their trailers are. So we'll go through some of that here today about like kind of what we're looking forward to. So we're kind of in the gap week between the August rush of news and releases and then going into September, obviously. Some of us have been spending time finishing up games from the last couple of months. I personally have finally finished Xenoblade 3. I am still kind of interested in potentially doing a sort of spoiler cast, or at least an open spoiler discussion on the game, but obviously we'll want to wait until Josh is back to do that, so stay tuned on that. We have a couple of the August releases that people have been playing through. We're going into September and looking forward to what games are later in the month from that we're going to be playing. But a lot of our game discussion today is going to be kind of a little bit of off-the-wall stuff that we have been squeezing in between the releases of these 2 months. I have listed here that the first game on our list that we're going to be talking about, and this is actually related to a recent piece of news in a very tangential way, is that Adam took the time to play through Koudelka. Now, Adam, I know some people listening might know what Koudelka is, but many probably don't. And so what is Koudelka? Why have you played it? And just let us know your thoughts.
Yeah, so, last week we talked about the announcement of the Kickstarter for Arm Fantasia and Pennyblood, which are basically spiritual successors from the original creators for, respectively, the Wild Arms RPG series and the Shadow Hearts series. Now, the Shadow Hearts series itself is 3 games, all on the PlayStation 2. It's Shadow Hearts Covenant, Shadow Hearts from the New World. So it's a trilogy. However, it did have a prequel that Shadow Hearts effectively spun off of. And that prequel is on the PlayStation 1, and it's called Koudelka. And I had mentioned in a previous podcast that I had played all the Wild Arms games, I had played all the Shadow Hearts games, but I hadn't played Koudelka. And last week I had finished Soul Hackers 2. I'm waiting for games from September that I'm interested to come out. So I'm like, hey, you know what? This game, Koudelka, is not very long. It's listed to be like 15 hours roughly, and I have never played it, so why not? Let me slot that in, and I own it. So I decided to play through it.
What do you own it on? Just curious. Like if someone wanted to play
I have a PlayStation 1 disc. I don't have a PlayStation 1, but I just play it on the PlayStation 3. I still have my PlayStation 3 hooked up, so I can play PlayStation 1 games. But it works. So if you're not familiar with Shadow Hearts, it is a traditional styled JRPG in terms of turn-based, settings. You get a party and whatnot, but it has a sort of gothic horror feel, tone, theme to it. So they even call themselves gothic horror RPGs, which aren't too common really in these series. There are a few you can point out, but Shadow Hearts is one of the premier series, I think, out of a series that doesn't have that many, or out of a genre, if you will, that doesn't have that many to choose from. So Koudelka was kind of the first of that set before Shadow Hearts spun off of it, and it's a game that is set in a monastery / it's like a church / prison, I believe, somewhere in. Oh, let me look this up. Give me a second.
Who is the developer of the game? I'll look that up.
Yeah, it was created by Hiroki Kikuta, who was formerly of Square. And they formed Signoff to develop specifically this game. Is this the only game they made? No, they were also developers of Shadow Hearts, but only they just didn't use the Signoff title after that. But yeah, so this game was originally released for the PlayStation 1, and it is the prequel to the Shadow Hearts series. Just give me a sec here. I'm looking up where it's set. It's in a monastery / prison in Wales, I believe. Yeah. in Wales.
In the late, like right around the turn of the century to the 1900s.
Yep. And so Koudelka is a witch. She's like a gypsy witch. Now, I know gypsy is not a word you're supposed to use, but that's sort of what they call her. And also, she refers to herself as a roam. It just depending on who you are in the game, that's what they describe her as. Again, this game came out in 1997, or 1999, excuse me. And she is drawn to this monastery area because she hears a spirit basically calling to her. And when she arrives there, she meets two other characters there. One is Edward, who is basically just a vagabond. He's a thief. He's looking for treasures and women and whatnot. And another is James, who is like a bishop. And he's there for unknown reasons. You figure that out later. And those are your three party members in the game. So it's kind of a set permanent party that you get. And the game is it kind of gives me a vibe of a few other games. It kind of reminds me of Vagrant Story in the sense that it has a similar graphical style in terms of its, polygonal characters and design and whatnot. It kind of reminds me of the original Resident Evils because every room in the mansion has like a permanent kind of set camera, like a fixed camera is what I mean. And also you're basically in an abandoned, literally like evil residence. Wondering kind of what happened there. So kind of it feels like a mix of these other games in a turn-based RPG setting. And there's also survival like elements to it as you explore the rooms of this monastery/prison. You're finding ammo for your guns. You're finding health items. You're finding new weapons and things like that you can use. Like you can find a rifle and you can find a shotgun and things like that. So the thing about this game that I appreciated most is that it's got a confined setting. It's not like a lot of, especially Japanese, well, I guess all RPGs really usually kind of have like these escalating scales. Like it ends up being like a world bending epic event. And sometimes have like hundreds of characters or whatnot. This is a confined setting, all set in a single building, basically. You only get the 3 playable characters and there's just a few other characters alongside. And it's relatively short. Like I said, I beat it in like 13 hours, even if you take your time, no longer than 15 hours. So it's a pretty just, self-contained game, and I appreciate it for that. It is turn-based. Now, the biggest downside to Koudelka is that the game feels like it's barely holding itself together. It is very slow. You have to have a lot of patience to play this game because it's a turn-based RPG, and in between every turn, the game just takes a long time to switch to the next character.
You mean just like technically it's
technically slow. I mean, kind of by design too, but just technically, it takes a long time for actions to happen, for the character turn to switch to the next character, to literally render like the ability that you're using in the battle. It's a very slow game. I played it on not original hardware, but I played the original version on a PlayStation 3. I'm assuming you could get an emulated version and kind of fix a lot of those things in terms of its performance. But that's kind of the biggest drawback to the game, is that you kind of have to go into it unknowing that, like, okay, this game is a little bit of a slog to play through. But it's kind of just an interesting little story. You're basically learning about what happened to this mansion and the events that were going there. I know it's an old game, but I don't want to spoil it. And you learn like why James is there. You learn about the voice that was calling out to Koudelka at the beginning of the game and what happens to her. In terms of like the game like mechanics, it's just pretty typical. Like I said, kind of a mix between RPG and survival. But in terms of just like the tone and the style and the feel of the game, I think it's really cool. It's obviously very similar to Shadow Hearts. It's worth mentioning that this is like canon to Shadow Hearts.
I was going to ask, like, I was going to wait till the next break, but you mentioned before that this game was self-contained, but it's also kind of like this unofficial, semi-official Shadow Hearts prequel, but came out like not really a prequel because it came out before Shadow Hearts, right? So, like, to what extent is this connected? To what extent do you feel like this is? Like, if someone wanted to play through the Shadow Hearts series, is this part of that series? Like, it seems like it's in a really weird, like, middle stage.
Yeah, so I said the story is self-contained. Like, when you finish Koudelka, there's no, like, if you didn't know that there was a sequel series that followed it, there would be no indication that there would be, right?
Right.
So it's like it's the story at the end of this is done. It's over. Koudelka, it is canonically officially a sequel to, or a pre. I guess there's technically the best word to be like predecessor, because it's not. It was developed first. Koudelka, the character, who's also the name of the game, does show up in Shadow Hearts as sort of like a side character. There's like a little bit of a small story arc around her. And so when I played Shadow Hearts, a long time ago, she just kind of felt like a character in that game that you meet and you learn about. And she's a witch, and she's, I believe, if I remember correctly, she's being detained in Shadow Hearts. I didn't really know her backstory other than what Shadow Hearts told me, but this game is that. So it's just sort of like she shows up in the original Shadow Hearts as like another character. So if you play Koudelka first, you get that additional context about who she is and basically like an event that happened in her life at this monastery. So it's one of those things, again, I don't think you have to play Koudelka first. It's just, more context to a singular character. And Koudelka doesn't show up in Shadow Hearts 2 or 3, just the first one. So sort of an interesting, I guess, way to take that character and just kind of place her into the other game. One thing that's sort of interesting, I won't spoil it, but Koudelka has a couple of different endings, just like Shadow Hearts has 2 different endings. And the final boss of Koudelka is pretty darn tough, like relative to the rest of the game. It's hard. And if you don't have to beat the final boss to get an ending, it almost feels like one of those boss battles. A lot of RPGs have this, where it's like you don't have to win this battle, but you can if you're really good or grind a lot or whatever.
Only it's the final boss.
Yeah, it's just like that, only it's the final boss. And so I lost the first time because, I'm learning the mechanics and whatnot of the boss. And you get a pretty satisfying ending, to be honest, even when you lose. I'm like, oh, that's kind of a cool ending. Let me try again and, train up a bit, get some better levels and stats and whatnot. And then I beat the boss. And then the ending you get when you beat the boss is actually less satisfying. It's like shorter. It's technically happier, but it's just kind of like, oh, okay. And I actually looked it up. I guess the ending where you lose is technically the canon one. Which is interesting because that's actually very apt for Shadow Hearts, because technically the ending to the original Shadow Hearts that is, quote, canon is the one that is the bad ending. It gets a little bit more confusing than that, and I know Chow can explain how as well. But it just felt apt that like this kind of this quote unquote bad ending is actually the one that canonically happened within the series. But yeah, it's just it's a game that I think I enjoyed, like I said, like the tone and the style and the structure of it more so than the actual like game design and like performance of it, because that's a pretty big hurdle to get over. But I'm glad I played it. Now I'm definitely ready for Penny Blood, which obviously won't be in the same series, but will be all the similar elements we assume. So yeah. That was my experience with it. Only 15 hours. So
while you were talking about it, I was looking up and seeing like, is Shadow Hearts available like on PSN or PSN Plus Premium or whatever they call it now? Apparently, back in May there was like some trademarks for it, so people thought it might be coming to Premium, but I guess nothing has surfaced yet. So
I believe the company that owns the Shadow Hearts IP is a pachinko company right now.
Oh, neat.
Stuff.
Sorry,
Are you sure it's not Konami?
No, it's not. But so it's like, basically, they can't make a new technically Shadow Hearts game because some pachinko company has the rights to it, I guess. Another interesting thing about Koudelka, about its development, was that a lot of it was developed in, I believe, like San Francisco in terms of the... It got English voices. It actually has a pretty darn decent English dub for a PlayStation 1 game, and it's almost fully voiced. There actually is no Japanese voice track. It's one of those games that even in Japan, it's got English voices with Japanese subtitles, and it was recorded in I believe California, and even a lot of like the mocap was done in California. So I thought that was just kind of interesting. It sort of reminds me of like the original like Resident Evils that also had English voices, only better than that.
So it's a PS1 game that uses mocap. That's kind of fun.
Yeah, and
I think Vagrant Story did too. So that comparison, I think Vagrant Story did also use mocap. Maybe. I'm trying to remember.
I'm not sure. But anyways, this game is 4 discs long. Like 4 discs on PlayStation.
It's like a 13-hour game across 4 discs.
I think the audio is a lot of that.
Oh, really? That's kind of fun.
Yeah,
like it's like this game
fully
was
dubbed.
like way
Yeah.
more ambitious than like the technology at the time.
Technically, fully dub's not even correct because if that's the original voice acting, it's in English. It's not technically a dub. It's obviously ADR, but yeah, it's maybe more of an interesting game than a good one. But now I'm ready for Penny Blood, I guess. So I'll revisit that in 3 or 4 years.
Well, I mentioned last time when we talked about Penny Blood and the Wild Arms spiritual successor that like I had only played from the New World, the third Shadow Hearts game, like the Black Sheep game, and like maybe I should finally play the other two, but like the fact that they're not available on PSN in any fashion is just like, man, like I guess I got to find a PS2 disc and find a way to play that. Because if you go to like PSN on PS3, you can't get those games, right? Not that I even have a PS3.
No, it's not on that either.
Well, maybe eventually PS Plus's premium, whatever we're called, will be able to support these things. But yeah, obviously that Kickstarter has been successful so far. And I know it's met their minimum goal. I haven't followed up, and like it's still got a month to go, so who knows where it's going to end up. But they originally were shooting for what, 750,000, and they surpassed that in like a day and a half. So it looks like it's going pretty well. We'll follow up in a few weeks to see where it ends up at. Likely it'll be a long time before we see either of those games. But it sounds like, based on your recommendation and just kind of like the word of mouth in general, that especially not so much Koudelka, but Shadow Hearts and Shadow Hearts Covenant are called classics that, regardless of whether or not they have a spiritual successor on the way or not, are really great games that should be played. So at one point, I want to make sure I get around to those. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for sharing your experience with Koudelka. Sounds like it's a very interesting kind of short experimental game that was ahead of its time in a few ways. The next game that we have listed here is something that Chow has listed that he's been playing in between releases this summer. And that is a game called Shining Wind. Now, Chow, you told me that this was a spin-off of the Shining Force series. Do I have that right? What is Shining Wind, and why have you decided to play it?
Okay, so to clarify, it is a direct sequel to Shining Tears. Shining Tears actually came out to the West. So, if anyone plays Shining Tears...
is this related to Shining Force, or no?
Shining Tears is kind of like a spin-off. It's kind of like their setting, but it has nothing to do with Shining Force.
Oh, okay.
Technically, it's like, just imagine they're in like the same world, so they have like the centaurs, like the beastmen, like stuff like that, right?
All right. So Shining Wind is the sequel to the spinoff.
Yes.
Shining. Okay.
Okay. So to why I'm playing this game? Well, I remember the soundtrack was really good for this game when I played it a long, long time ago, and they made a lot of anime figures of the series. So why not just play the game and finish it? Oh, that's kind of like the idea of it.
So you played it before, but you hadn't finished it?
Yeah, I played it before I dropped it.
And how do the anime figures factor in?
The anime figures are extremely popular for its time, because probably feel like the designs for its time. This game is basically anime trope 101. Every anime trope you can think of is thrown into this game, and if you love Japanese voice acting, this is also the peak of this game, because they basically hired the best in the business from the Japanese industry of its time.
So this is a Japanese-only PS2 game that released in 2007. Do you have any of these figures, Chow?
No, I do not.
Oh,
I think I have...
I'm disappointed.
They are too expensive, or I can't find the right kind. I think the poses do not look right, but they're really popular.
If this is a 2007 PS2 game, it's probably pretty technically competent. That's late in the gen.
It is technically competent, but it is a very dated-looking game.
Oh, really?
Okay. Characters appear in an isometric battlefield, and the sprites are pre-rendered 3D, but they don't look that good. You know what I'm saying?
I just assumed that a late-gen PS2 game would look pretty good.
Like, it runs at, 60 FPS. It just doesn't look good. So, let's see. Where should we start? We should start with the story or the battle system?
It's an action RPG, right?
Let's start with the story, at least like the premise. Like you control a party of characters, I assume.
Okay, so when I say it's anime trope 101, the story begins when you visit
Amnesia.
No amnesia.
No.
Okay, but the first game had a main character with amnesia, though.
Oh, okay. So they couldn't they would go back to that well if they could, but they had already used it in the first game.
So they start them going to school, and what is it? the main character's childhood friend knows something's awfully wrong with the school, and she's like, our classmates are missing. The gates are acting funny. Let's check it out." And apparently, their school got isekai into the other world, into the Shining Force world, basically.
So that's how it's related to Shining Force. Is that it's like Shining Force is the isekai world.
So that's basically what happens there, and how the story goes on is that the main character is a chosen one. He gets to be a soul blader.
This is Sword Art Online before Sword Art Online.
So he's a sword blader. So whoever person he becomes really friends of, he can he can pull the heart out of the his partner, and it becomes a sword. So that's an anime trope right there. That meme where they pull a sword out of their heart, and how the story progresses that the weapons become stronger as the more closer he is with his partners, right? And they're all girls in this game, so we got harem into this game, and we got every single anime tropes that you can think of. We got a girl that is like 1,000-year lolly, like stuff like that. Every anime trope you can think of.
I assume you have like childhood friend and tsundere girl and all that.
Basically, yes, it's all there. Okay. A school idol, it's there. Because how I mentioned is like one of the classmates missing, and that's the school idol, right? She's in the isekai world before everyone else did, right?
So while you're talking about this, I pulled up just some random gameplay footage on YouTube. It reminds me of like the 2000s era Ys games in terms of like the art style of like the sprites that are kind of like isometrically placed on like on the background art. Only like more cheap looking.
Like it's not a really high looking production value game. I think they make a spin-off anime of it as well, so you can watch an anime that covers some of the backstory. But I never seen the anime, so I can't give you a rundown on that.
Is this game worth playing?
I think it's worth playing if you're into like Japanese media, I guess.
If you just Shining Resonance.
I actually prefer this over Shining Resonance, actually.
I didn't really like Shining Resonance. Is kind of bad.
Because the story's a little bit more engaging. Even though I say it's like anime trope 101, there's more like intriguing plot to it. Like in the beginning, it's basically the main character just wants to go home because he got isekai'd, right? So he's like, how do I get home? And
you can't go home. You're the hero.
Well, and later on, there's other girls that come into play. There's a kingdom from this other field, and she's basically the main character gets involved with her plot because the Beastman's trying to assassinate her brother, and now you're trying to find out who's like behind the assassination plot and doing all the poisoning and all this shit, right? And in that plot is, how do I say it? Let's see. He thinks that by helping her, he can find this holy grail, and maybe this will let him return home. That's kind of like that subplot there. This game has multiple endings because in the game you get to do these bond events later on, and when you raise the character's level to a certain point, their ending will trigger at the end. So there's an ending where they go back home, or they stay there, or there's 5. I think there's 10 different endings, but there's kind of like one ending based on the faction and one ending based on the character. So there's 2 character per faction. So there's 2 endings where he returns home, but the girl that he ends up with is either the school idol or his childhood friend. So that's the possibility, right?
Makes sense.
And
I'm watching just some more of these just random gameplay footage of this, and I don't know who did the art, but the art's kind of pretty distinctive.
It's from Tony Taka. I think he used to work at SNK back then.
That's the same artist as Shining Resonance. Okay.
Oh, okay. So at least they've got that sort of consistency throughout the years.
So maybe, who knows? Maybe you could also treat it as this is like a prequel to Shining Resonance. Maybe, I don't know. I don't think it's connected to Shining Resonance in any way, but it has the same art style. So
if you like schlocky, tropey Japanese games, it sounds like this game has it in spades. But of course, it never was officially released in English. Maybe there's a fan translation out there. Usually for any game from like the PS2 era, that was never officially released in English. I assume that there's a fan translation somewhere. I can't vouch for the quality.
Well,
But
I'm playing in Japanese because I feel like my Japanese has gotten a lot better. That I can sort of understand what the characters are saying.
Mhm.
So yeah, went through over it and just playing through it, and basically that is what it is. Uh, yeah, I don't think there's an English translation of it. There is a fan base for it though.
I'm looking and I can't find anything easily, but there might be something out there. But yeah, no, I always enjoy that Chow's just decides to randomly play something because he likes the soundtrack or because there's like neat figures for a game. He's like, you know what, I want to play this.
Hey, this is how they get reverse advertising. It's like,
Yeah.
you like the figures, maybe I'll check the anime out.
Mm-hmm. So I know that was a bit of a weird like starting for a typical episode of our podcast, but I guess some of us are between games between August and September, so need to talk about both Koudelka and Shining Wind. We'll be back maybe to more regularly scheduled stuff next week. We have a few early September releases that a couple of us are playing through that maybe we can talk about next week. I'm not sure. We'll stay tuned on that. We have a couple features that are up on the site. One of these we'll just brush by really quickly. Both of these are actually written by James, so we'll give him a chance to talk about these if you'd like. Hey, welcome back. So you talked on one of the previous episodes of the podcast about Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak's first title update. So I just wanted to give a shout out here that you did write up your thoughts onto a feature onto rpgsite.net. So I don't think we have to spend any time really going over that because you already had a chance to speak to it, but we have the written version up on the site. Now, here's something that I do kind of want to give you time to talk about because we didn't get a chance to talk about it last week due to all the Gamescom news, is that obviously within the past week or so, we had the next update to Final Fantasy XIV, the 6.2 patch, which you don't do this for every patch, but for this one, you specifically wrote a feature up on basically an op-ed.
Well, I mean,
about
I did it for 6.1 too.
Ah, okay, so maybe we're in a rhythm now. But basically, 6.2, you say that as someone who has in the last couple months gotten really involved in like the end game rating scene, you say that 6.2 is basically a patch that you've really enjoyed. The actual name of your feature is it's been the best patch to be a raider. So basically, I want to give you a chance to talk about 6.2 here, about your feature that you wrote, and Chow can chime in as well about his experience with 6.2 and kind of what you thought about the most recent update to Final Fantasy XIV.
Yeah, I'm sure that Chow can agree with my thesis here, because basically the whole thing is that outside of expansion launches, whenever a new raid tier comes out in the past, it's just been that the normal modes and the savages come out the same day as the patch. But the dev team for 6.2 decided to do something different, and they delayed the savage launch by a week, which meant that anyone that was going to be doing those savage fights day one, they still had time to like go through the story at their own pace, try out the other content that's been added with the patch. And while there still is like prep that's required for getting ready for the raids, it's like much less of a time crunch, and you don't have to worry about missing out on things if you want to be able to comfortably raid on day one.
So basically, you're saying before when they launch on the same day, people would feel incentivized just to go immediately into the Savage raid and not get to enjoy just the other stuff with the patch.
Yep.
Is it Savage or Extreme? Sorry.
Savage.
Okay. So did this come out then like a week after the full 6.2 launch? So it was 6.2 kind of in two parts?
Yeah, it wasn't actually a separate patch release, though there was some maintenance where people think they might have done some last minute changes to the last fight's DPS check. But yeah, just week after the patch dropped, the Savage fights became available.
Are you still working on those, or how? Like, I don't know, like the typical time scale
I'm
about
still
like
working on them. I'm
like,
still working on them.
What's the usual time scale for like a good, just a generally good group to like clear those? Does it take like a week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks? I just really don't know.
I'd say around a month, give or take. Unless you're specifically a week one static, which those do exist, but I'd say most groups, most mid-core groups, you're looking at about a month to clear all the fights. And I'm not sure if Chow would agree, but
Did you have any other like thoughts or opinions on like 6.2 besides the on the, like you had mentioned like when we talked about the live letter about some of the other features that were coming with the patch? I don't know if you since you had a week before the Savage tier came out to just do the other stuff of the patch. I don't know if any of the other like the Island Sanctuary or any of that other mechanics ended up landing for you strongly or not really.
Island Sanctuary is really cool. It's fairly bare bones at the moment, but they've already said it's going to be added to with each patch, and it's a lot of fun now, even if it is pretty basic.
Remind me what that
the-
is again exactly.
So I was talking to Tony, and Tony said Island Sanctuary is basically Animal Crossing. Is that true?
Yeah, I'd say it's basically Animal Crossing.
Are there actually like? Yeah, go ahead.
You have your own island. It's the same for everyone. There's nodes where material can spawn. You gather materials to create tools and feed for animals that you capture, and also to build new facilities. And as you raise your sanctuary rank, you also get access to new things that you can build and whatnot. It's fairly basic. It's like even more basic than Animal Crossing. But it's also like the first content drop for it. So there's plenty there already. Like people that have been doing nothing but Island Sanctuary got it done in about like 20-30 hours, which in the grand scheme of things isn't that bad, because like the intended use of the content is something to do in between like queues if you're like a DPS, or if you want to have somewhere to hang out when you're not when you don't have like a house of your own and stuff like that.
Well, in general, as someone who doesn't play Final Fantasy 14, it does just seem kind of like a low energy, low stress, just kind of way to hang out and progress the game in a different fashion. And it is kind of nice. Like you said, it's the first, like they could iterate on it. And so like with 6.2, they introduce the idea and then they can build off of it. And now they can just kind of have that as another way to just kind of add on to the game with regular patches where they add different features specifically to that game mechanic, which is kind of nice.
Yep. Meanwhile, there's also the new story content. Obviously, a lot of people have been enjoying it. I think that the dungeon itself was maybe a little bit weak, but it was still fine. And the trial, especially, is really, really good. Like
I heard Chow.
especially,
I believe I saw him say in chat that he had like finished the story and like he was like finished it in 3 hours. Rip. Like was it a little bit shorter than normal?
I'm not sure if it's really shorter than normal, but it had a dungeon, it had a trial. The new extreme version of the trial is really, really good. Like it feels like most people that engage with that content kind of agree that the new extreme trial is like one of the best that the dev team has ever done.
That's
Okay, I'm going to show my ignorance here. You were fighting the fiends from Final Fantasy IV. Is that part of the trial, or is that something else?
Yes. So
Okay.
usually the way things work with 14 is that with each expansion, they'll have an additional series of trial fights that you can engage with after the main scenario, and they're added to the game via patches. Previous patches have had both the trial series, and then they'd have the capstone fight at the 0.3 patch. Since Endwalker's story ended with the 0.0 patch, what they've instead done is they basically started integrating what would have been a trial series into the main scenario. So we got our first new trial of the expansion post-launch support with 6.2, and instead of it being optional, it's just part of the main scenario, and you fight one of the 4 fiends that way.
Okay.
So does
it
that mean
look like we're going to fight all 4, because like one of them was also like a dungeon boss. So it's probably going to be so probably what's going to happen is 3 of the 4 fiends are probably going to be trials, and then the final one's probably going to be Golbez. So that would make sense. But yeah,
and would that not be in a trial, or like what do you think Golbez would be part of?
Golbez will definitely be a trial.
I think he'll be the 6.3 final boss. That's what.
Nah, I don't think they're going to do that because they specifically said that we won't know what 7.0 will be until like 6.5. So it seems like the 6.x patch series is kind of going to be its own story. So I think they're not going to finish it until like 6.5. Like they probably could, like if they wanted to rush it, finish it with 6.3, but I don't think they're going that route.
It seems like it's more of a bridging story between 6 and 7. Go ahead, Chow.
Oh, I was gonna say, like the 0.3 patches, it always has like the post game final boss. Like,
yeah, and I was just mentioning that Endwalker was different because they deliberately said before launch that the final boss for the story of Endwalker was the 6.01. So it's a bit different.
Well, for those that are currently playing or have lapsed on Final Fantasy XIV, we do have James's feature up on the site for 6.2 and for 6.1. So go ahead and give those a read, as well as the Monster Hunter Rise first title update feature. Both of those are up on the site. And now we're going to go into the news section. Now, a lot of this is mostly just looking forward to Tokyo Game Show. So if you want to hear about everything that came out of Gamescom, listen to last week's episode of the podcast because there was a lot. And again, I said this last week, but I'll say it again this week. Thanks so much, James, Josh, and Adam and Kite for keeping up on all that news because there was a ton. But as we go into Tokyo Game Show, it sounds like it's going to be, second first, same as the first for that. Obviously, we have a huge presence there.
Specifically?
It's like September 15th through 18th. So yeah, like 2 weeks from now. Yeah. In 2 weeks from now, we record this podcast on Saturdays. So we'll be recording it on the 17th. So we'll record it like in the middle of Tokyo Game Show, but after the first few days. So hopefully like any major announcements will have happened by then, but who knows for certain. But a lot of publishers have started to detail what games are going to have, in their theaters or have live streams or have playable demos. So Kite Steinbuck has done a great job covering both like anything that we would consider an RPG site's purview, as well as anything out of Square Enix, who always has a pretty big presence at Tokyo Game Show. So we have a list up on the site for any RPG related live streams for people who that decide to like stay up in the middle of the night or whatever weird hours these end up being in the West to watch these. Bandai Namco is going to be showing a few games. They have some stream time dedicated to older games like Dragon Ball Z Kakarot and Sword Art Online Alicization, which I guess is coming to Switch soon. So they probably are just taking the chance to market there. But they're also going to be showing that One Piece game, One Piece Odyssey, which we haven't really heard a bunch about since its initial reveal. So it'd be cool. We'll have hopefully our first real
One Piece was at a Gamescom. I think it was at a PAX.
Oh, was it?
So like there's been like playable like demos out that people have played. Now I think people are just kind of waiting for a release date on that because it doesn't have one yet. It's supposed to be this year.
Yeah, so maybe we'll get that out of Tokyo Game Show.
And maybe Dragon Ball Z Kakarot will get more DLC. I know they just announced DLC for Xenoverse 2. Like that game
Xenoverse 2 is like
yet.
that. Yeah, Xenoverse 2 is that game that just never dies. Like whenever there's
it was like for the new movie, the Gohan movie or whatever. So hey, but I could see Kakarot getting more DLC. They added the when it released on Switch, they had a new one. So who knows?
So Capcom will be there, and they'll be showing off Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. Obviously, that's still going through its title updates. The Mega Man Battle Network compilation they'll be showing off there, and they'll be.
Bandai Namco also has a Tales of event time.
They do.
And this is pure speculation. I'm gonna guess if they announce anything, it's gonna be another remaster, like in the Vesperia vein. I feel like Rise was only a year ago, and he's the producer. Tomizawa, I believe, said that he knew that people are clamoring for remasters of Abyss, Graces, Shilia, whatever. So that's my guess.
So which remaster would you want to see?
Graces?
That'd be a good one, I think. I've never I took a gap, like a break from Tales. Like I was pretty up and on it like through the PS2 era, but then in the PS3 era I kind of fell off. So I never played the two Zilla games. I played Zestiria and Berseria. So like the Zilla games, if those were like paired and remastered, I would play those, but they're probably less needing of a remaster than some of the older ones. Oh yeah, like I said, so Capcom is going through Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak and Mega Man Battle Network. They'll also be showing some other games, but Kite specifically try to target things that are in our purview. Like they'll probably be showing like Resident Evil Village VR or whatever it is.
Probably get information for the next title update because it's coming out this month for Sunbreak.
Mm-hmm. 505 Games will be showing Aiden Chronicles 100 Heroes. Obviously, we finally just like a week or two ago got footage on that for the first time since its announcement. So that's kind of cool that they're ramping up the marketing on that, which makes sense because we're in the back half of the year and it's slated to come out next year. Koei Tecmo, we talked about this kind of briefly, I think 2 podcasts ago, or maybe last podcast. They'll be showing the new Gust game, which we haven't detailed what it is yet, as well as the Neo team's new title, Wolong Fallen Dynasty. Sega Atlas has announced that they're going to be talking mostly about their upcoming new ports for the Persona series, like obviously Persona 5 Royal in October. Is it the 21st? I forget what the date was. Coming to PC. And then we also have the remasters for, well, not remasters, just I guess like up ports for Persona 4 Golden and Persona 3 Portable to modern consoles and PC next year. So maybe we'll get some dates for 3 and 4. Hoyoverse, they'll be there, formerly known as MiHoYo. Obviously, the regular updates on Genshin Impact, and obviously they've got 2 titles in development that we're interested in. That's Honkai Star Rail and Zenless Zone Zero. So there'll be updates on those games. I think both of those games have had like multiple kind of closed betas. So there's already like decent amounts of gameplay footage captured on these. So I don't know if there'll be more release details or things like that. Level 5 will be showing off like a free-to-play follow-up to Megaton Musashi, which is that mech game that never came out. It came out last year in Japan, I believe, but never had an official English announcement.
Will any level 5 game ever get an English release again?
Seemingly not.
The last few have seemingly been footed by like Nintendo. That's like Yokai Watch 3 and Snack World. But we never got Yokai Watch 4 on either platform. And yeah, it's like right now it seems like unlikely.
I remember like a year ago, there was this rumor that was posted on 4chan of all places about what happened with Level 5 Abbey. And obviously not just a pinch like the entire salt shaker. But from what I've heard from people that would know about the situation with Abby, like the stuff that was posted on 4chan was pretty accurate. So basically, what I'm saying is I would not be shocked if all that stuff that was talked about there was like completely true, which is kind of crazy to think about.
And then I think the last publisher that I've yet to mention is Square Enix. They recently have detailed they published their own TGS webpage, just shows off all the games they're talking about, and it's a pretty long list. I don't know if I just read all the way through this. Like Forspoken is a release for next year. Obviously, they're going to be taking time to market that. It recently just had its pretty long like gameplay features overview trailer. Valkyrie Elysium, obviously that's releasing right around the same time as Tokyo Game Show. So they're just going to take the stage time to market that game. Star Ocean 6: The Divine Force also coming up pretty soon. Romancing Saga Minstrel Song Remastered. Adam's looking forward to this. We don't have a true release date on that yet, so maybe that's
that was actually interesting because apparently that's actually playable at TGS.
Oh, okay.
Like, and even though it doesn't have a date, like okay. I mean, obviously it's just a remaster, but
Voice of Cards, The Beast of Burden. We haven't talked about this yet, but they have announced a 3rd game in that series, surprisingly, and they're going to take the time to talk about that. And that game is out like in a week from now, so it'll be out by the time during Tokyo Game Show. But again, they're going to be just taking the time to market it while they have the stage. Harvestella, Tactics Ogre Reborn, Final Fantasy 14, 16. Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth. So 16 and 7 Rebirth, it sounds like that they don't obviously have playable demos of those, but they'll have trailers at their mega theater. So we might get new trailers for 16 and or Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth. Crisis Core Reunion, which is obviously coming out later this year. Or is it later this year or just winter?
This winter, which could be like December, January, February, or even March.
So we might get some of that. Stranger Paradise will have a presence at their thing again. So I don't know if that'll be another DLC. I do like, though, as you go through this list, and their mobile games like Brave XPS and War of the Visions, Romancing Saga Reuniverse, and then at the very end, Power Wash Simulator.
Hell yeah. Hey, that game has done really well for them, probably. Breaking out of their usual audience.
I mean, it cost you $5 to play in real life.
But yeah, so obviously Square Enix has a ton of different titles to show in some respect or another. Like some of them are playable, some of them will just be trailers, and we'll try to keep up on all of those as they release, and whatever comes out we'll make sure to report on. But yeah, a lot of those will just have segments in their theater for just trailer times, and Kite has done a pretty good job of detailing what is exactly shown at which date at which time. I'm the sort of person I won't catch it live. I'll just catch it after the fact. But yeah, pretty much you could spend all weekend just watching Square Enix streams and trailers if you wanted, because they've got it packed for the whole 4 days, Thursday through Sunday. And I guess for Tokyo Game Show, that's kind of a preview of what to look forward to. But since there's really no news yet, that's kind of everything we've got from there. I'm hoping that we get more details on Ever Crisis, but I don't know like how much we will be expecting from that.
Is that not on their
It's supposed
list?
to come out this year, right?
It is on their list.
Yeah,
but
it was supposed to come out this year. I don't know if they really have said anything since last year on it though. No.
Yeah, I'm trying to say. Yeah, we haven't
Tokyo
really had
Game
a lot of
Shows.
details.
Tokyo Game Show is where we would get more info on it. So look forward to it.
I guess it will be launching in closed beta, so they might give us a closed beta window for it. I don't know if I'm interested in the game, but I don't know if I'm that interested to get into like a beta, but maybe. Of course, I don't know like how much gacha is gonna poison what that game is, but we'll see. As for other news, I guess we'll just go into this one because I'd already mentioned it. So, Square Enix just announced this last week that they are making a third game in this Voice of Cards series, Voice of Cards: The Beasts of Burden. It is set to release digitally on PlayStation, Nintendo Switch, and PC on September 13th. So the other two games were recently released and like in pretty quick succession. That is the Isle Dragon Roars and the Forsaken Maiden. And Adam, I think you're the only person that has played both those games. You might be the only person that's played any of them. So, as someone who has managed to keep up with the rapid release pace of Voice of Cards, do you have more interest in continuing the series, or like how do you feel about all of a sudden a new game in September, just out of nowhere?
I'm not exactly sure. So, I mean, the games are pretty short. They're like 10 hours or whatever. I mean, relative to RPGs, of course. And the first two games were obviously very similar, but there were a few key differences, I think, that gave them each their own flavor. I personally liked The Forsaken Maiden more. It was just, there's a little bit more teeth to it. There's a little bit more interesting mechanics. I thought the story was more interesting personally. Like Beast of Burden, I'll be like, I'll play it because it's not a big time commitment, but it's not like I was clamoring for more, just, I guess this one, the gimmick for this one that sets it apart is that you're supposedly you can capture enemies and use them as like skill cards. I'm like, oh, okay, sure. We'll see if that's interesting. On paper, I don't know. But, it comes out in like a week already, or maybe a little bit more than a week, 10 days. So, yeah, I'll play it. I'm a little bit, I guess, confused about like the strategy here. Just release two games a year.
why is like Square Enix releasing like 6 or 7 games within like a 2-month span? Like no, like they're releasing like 5 games in September alone or some shit.
Let's see. They have Dio Field. They have this Voice of Cards now, I guess. They have Valkyrie. They have Star Ocean. They have Harvestella. That's 5. They have Tactics Ogre. That's 6. They have, I mean, we don't know when it is, but there's Crisis Core. They have Minstrel Song. That's 8. Is there anything else I missed in this year?
Let me look at the review sheet. There might be something there. I guess technically.
Oh, then Forspoken is shortly after that. That's 9.
Technically, Front Mission.
Oh yeah, Front remake. Mission. There's also Dragon Quest X Offline, although that's not
Dragon Quest Treasures.
Dragon Quest Treasures. That's like 11, and I haven't even counted like Final Fantasy 16 or 7 or
Nier Automata Switch, which I guess that's just the port, but still, it's like
we're up to a dozen games. Like why?
It's like
I don't know.
And the worst part is that a lot of these look really cool. Like I want to play Harvestella. I wasn't super interested in Dio Field, but from what I've heard of like impressions, like, yeah, I want to play that. It's like, why are you releasing everything within the span of 2 months?
I will say I put some time in, like I mentioned, I put some time in the Dio Field demo, and I'm really gelling with it. I don't know. I played Triangle Strategy, which was another game that they published that was released this year. And it's I don't want to compare a demo to a full release, but like I feel like I'm gelling with Dio Field more, just the real time with pause aspect of it. I don't know. I'm really looking forward to that one in later September. But yeah, Square Enix, they're probably gonna have a huge presence like on our final game of the year list, just because they're like, here's 14 games to consider. Please,
they're just going with the volume method. Just release everything, and something will stick, I guess.
Honestly, it's nice to see the AA games, like AA games, kind of make a comeback here, even if it's all seemingly from one company.
Yeah. Well, Adam, you're not obligated, but if you would like to play Voice of Cards of Beast of Burden and report back, you may.
Well, Paige
because you're-
actually reviewed the first two.
Oh, okay. Maybe we'll get.
I don't know if she'll
her.
review the third one, or maybe we need to. I don't know if we want to get a new, fresh perspective on the third review, or just have Paige review it again if she wants. I'm not sure.
Do we think we'll finally get like a physical copy of these games once the third's out? Do you think they'll just have triple
like a
pack?
collection? Maybe.
Yeah.
It'll be Asia only for Switch.
Yeah.
They've done that a few times.
A couple other small pieces of news. This one kind of was just right at the tail end of Gamescom. We got a new trailer for Flintlock: The Siege of Dawn. It's like a 5-minute gameplay overview trailer, and this is an action RPG slated for next year. We did get a small new piece of news for the upcoming Pokemon game, Scarlet and Violet. They revealed a new Pokemon, which is like a poison monkey named, I have no idea how to pronounce it, Grafaiai.
The monkey, like if you look at the screenshots, there's like some rainbowy trees behind it. So I wonder if it's supposed to be like graffiti monkey.
Yeah, it is, because like if you look at its like index fingers, it secretes like a very like neon like colorful like poison that it uses to mark its territory. I'm gonna check Cerebi what's the Japanese name, because that might help with pronunciation if it's the same. 1 second.
I like how we just totally skipped over the Flintlock game. We got more gameplay. It's from
the
Bastion.
This Japanese name for Grafaiai is so dumb. Oh my god. I guarantee you're not gonna guess what the Japanese name is.
Okay.
The Japanese name for Grafaiai is Tagging-ol.
Tagging-ol?
Is what?
Yeah, like tagging LE. It's like, what?
Oh, okay. What does that mean?
Tagging as in like gain tags, gain signs.
Okay.
Oh.
So it's definitely graffiti based.
Yeah, well, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet have, if I remember right, a still relative to like we're only a couple months away from release, a pretty small new roster of Pokemon. So I wonder if we're gonna get a lot of these like 40-second trailers that just show.
Yeah, like a week ago they introduced like it's like a snake bicycle thing.
Yeah, Cyclizar, and now we got
Yeah.
Grafaiai, and I wouldn't be surprised if we get like one a week now until release or something like that. We still haven't seen the evolutions, right, for the starters.
I know that these games leak a lot, so they might be leaked somewhere, but there's also there's probably a bunch of fake leaks, so nothing official, I think.
All the remaining news on the docket this week is mostly like release date updates and a couple sales, or one sales update. So I guess we'll just kind of go through these. Speaking about Square Enix published titles, Live Alive on Nintendo Switch has sold 500,000 units, which I think for a Nintendo Switch exclusive remake of a 20-year-old game, that seems pretty good. And Live Alive,
that's better than I expected, especially just in a month.
Yeah,
that's pretty darn good.
And Live Alive
I
is
still
one of
need
those
to get
games
back to finishing it.
It doesn't take long.
That I feel like this one could do pretty well at our end of the year listing, because I don't know, it left a pretty good impression on me. I enjoyed that more than I thought I would going in. But yeah, Live Alive sold 500,000 units on Switch alone. We'll see if it ends up like other HD 2D titles making its way to other platforms in any way, but I don't think anything's been announced or even really strongly rumored, so we'll see. Let's see. Trinity Trigger. We talked about this game when it was first announced earlier this year for Japan audiences from Furyu. It's releasing in Japan, like right around Tokyo Game Show. I don't think, Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, that it had an official Western announcement until now. So XSEED and Marvelous, who always like pair up on these to release in North America and Europe, have announced that Trinity Trigger will release in early 2023 for PlayStation 4 and 5 and Switch for the West. And alongside that, they gave a new announcement trailer of the game to coincide with the Western localization announcement. Whenever I see
this is like an action RPG that kind of looks like a little bit like Secret of Mana or the original Trials of Mana in terms of being like top-down action. You get different weapons, like your triggers become your weapons. There's 3 different characters. I know Josh was saying when he played the demo, you can like combo your attacks in certain ways. So yeah, it's being developed not by Furyu, but by a company, like a developer known as 3 Rings. I remember looking up what they did before, and it's not a lot. So we'll see. But yep, next year for consoles, PC release.
This is a little bit shallow. Whenever I see this game, I'm like, oh, I forgot what this was. Oh, it's that game. And there's like a incongruence between like the 2D art and like the in-game graphics that kind of like is unnerving to me. And like the part of the trailer includes like some anime styled cutscenes, plus obviously like the art on the box art. And I don't want to be like shallow, but it just seems like there's a really it's this game out of compared to most has a higher discrepancy between like the two art styles that
I
it
think
almost like
what's sort of funny is I think that catches some people off guard frequently because they really love like the concept art, the 2D art, but then when they actually see what it looks like in game, it's like, oh, this does not look good. Oddly enough, the last game that comes, or a game that comes to mind for that is Monarch, which was also released by Furyu. It's a different developer, that's Landcars. That was released earlier this year. Like the 2D art, like the character art, is great, portrait art. But even Scott mentioned in his review, like when you actually look at like how the game actually looks when you're actually playing it, it's like, oh, this does not look good. Whoops.
And,
like,
and
literally the 2D art and like any sort of animated opening is like, it's pretty much just marketing. This isn't what the game looks like.
Well, I mean, like even here, they are marketing it with plenty of gameplay. So I'm not insinuating that like they're hiding what it actually looks like. It's just that there doesn't seem to be a lot of congruence between what the 2D art and the in-game style looks like. It's just like, oh, that's what it looks like. Oh, I see. But it looks I don't know. It looks like it could be like charming at least. But I don't know. I think I just have to see more to see because a lot of things that they've shown are pretty just like typical. Like there's multiple weapons to choose from and skill combos and things like that. Is this multiplayer or not? I'm trying to remember. Like, can you play? Like, I know it has the three characters.
It has 3-player local multiplayer, but not online.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe this will be fun in 3-player, but it's kind of one of those things where, like, whenever a game doesn't have local multiplayer, I'm like, oh, that stinks. Or when it does have online multiplayer, like, oh, that stinks. Like, why can't? That's weird that it doesn't have online multiplayer. But yeah, it'll be sometime next year for Trinity Trigger, and I guess we'll obviously, since it comes out in just a couple of weeks in Japan, we'll pretty much know like the reception to the game well before it releases in the West. But we'll see. Maybe it'll be a surprise hit. A couple other release dates to go on. This one's not for a game, but for a game-inspired anime. This is Cyberpunk Edgerunners. I don't know if there's really like any hype for this. This is an anime based on this Cyberpunk 2077 universe, and I forget who is. I guess Studio Trigger.
And Trigger has some of their biggest names on it, like Yoshinari for art and Imashi for director. So it's like, at least from a production value standpoint, it could be pretty good. Obviously, the I should mention that the story is being written not by Trigger, but by CD Projekt and others. So I have no idea how the story will pan out.
I think that's a good thing because Trigger can't seem to write.
Oh, really? But it's got like the high end or the big name Trigger people on it. So at least from an animation standpoint, it might be interesting. I guess this is also worth mentioning that Cyberpunk, or I guess CD Projekt, is doing a stream for Cyberpunk next week to basically, they haven't said exactly what it's for, but it's probably for DLC because or an expansion of some sort. We knew they were working on one. That is on Tuesday. They just say it's a special episode of Night City Wire. We'll talk about Cyberpunk Edgerunners as well as what's next for Cyberpunk 2077. I haven't played the game. I'm interested in trying it out. I'm assuming, I'm hoping, anyways, I'm hopeful that after, a year and a half or 2 years of patches, that it's at least decent now. That's my hope. So you played it, right?
Yeah.
But
I mean, I
know I kind of have a grasp of like certain things it does well and certain things it may not do so well. So I think I'll go in with balanced expectations. I still want to do that eventually.
When I watch this, so these are going to be 10 episodes that are all dropping on Netflix at once. So it'll be a binge watch for anyone that's interested. But like
this trailer was a not safe for work trailer, so it's kind of over,
But like that's
definitely not safe for work.
That's the same thing that they kind of did with the game itself, where it almost like, I feel like it's almost too on the nose, where it's like, yeah, this game's mature. Have we let you know that this game's mature yet? Yeah, we're a mature game. We're totally mature. I'm like, okay, I get it. Like, I don't know.
Even racism. Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah, what does this game have going for it?
Like, I'd rather just let it speak for itself that it has mature themes, rather than say like, "Ooh, this is a not safe for work trailer."
Rather than it being like literally an advertising bullet point, like we are mature. Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds like they're trying too hard.
Yeah, I am. I kind of want to so I played through Cyberpunk. Like I had a pre-release copy. I didn't end up reviewing it for the site. Alex did, but I haven't played it since. So I played it like version 1.0, like not even after like day one patch. So I'm curious to be like, all right, after 2 weeks of patches, does it feel, or 2 years of patches, does it feel any better? But I don't know, if you're an anime fan, if you're somehow in the slice between anime fan and Cyberpunk fan, there's a 10-episode anime dropping in about a week that you can watch on Netflix. We have another indie game. September seems like it's full of indie games, and it's hard to. I want to give them all their due, but there's just so many that it's hard to.
Right.
But we have the Outbound Ghost is set to release on PC on September 21st, and this one is really charming. It is basically another Paper Mario like, so similar to like Bug Fables or a few of the other Paper Mario likes. And I think
Bug
this
Fables
one
is great. So
yeah, Bug Fables is great, and I'm pretty interested in the Outbound Ghost because I don't know, I just really like that style of game, and we got a new trailer alongside the release date announcement. So it's kind of later in September, around the same time that like Trails from Zero and Dio Field and all those other ones start dropping. So I don't know if it'll squeeze in, but usually these types of games aren't too long. I think this game used to have, or had at one point, a limited demo during one of the summer festivals. I don't think it has a live demo on Steam right now, but yeah, it's coming out in just a couple of weeks. The Outbound Ghost, Paper Mario like, and it's. If I make time for one more indie game this year, it'll probably be this one. We have a couple other indie games that have release dates later in the year. One of the dungeon crawling games that we talked about, at least on one earlier episode of the podcast, I think this came out around E3 Summerfest Games Fest time. Beneath Oresa is going into early access on October 12th. And as typical for early access games, I have no idea how long it plans to stay there, but we'll kind of keep tabs on it. And when it does come out of early access, we'll probably follow up. But going into early access in October, if anyone has been keeping their eyes out on that game.
I'll admit, when I saw this as like a roguelike deck builder dungeon crawler, it's just like this feels like a procedurally generated title or genre. There's so many of those. But
and also early access, it's like, well, I'll check back in a year and a half when it gets to 1.0 and see like if it's progressed since then. Here's one that I'm actually also pretty interested in. Lost Eidolons. This is the like Western high fantasy Fire Emblem like. Is going to launch on PC on October 13th, and it will be also launching on Xbox next year. So this game also had, I think, a Summer Games Fest demo at some point. I hope I don't have that wrong, but it's been kind of in like this not quite early access mode for a while, but it's getting its full release in October. I think it looks pretty interesting. We got a new trailer alongside the release date announcement of that as well. And then this isn't a release date, but more of an ending date. We already talked about how Dragalia Lost is shutting down after being out for, I think, like 4 years total, 5 years total.
4 years. 4 years.
It will be shutting down on November 30th. If you're catching up on Dragalia Lost, I remember we went through all the details, like all the shutdown, like where all the events are available for people to catch up on and at least enjoy the game while it's in its limelight here. But
it's sad to see it got the game go, but yeah.
Did you ever put a lot of time into Dragalia Lost, Chow, or no?
There was a period I did. The gameplay got really toxic at one of the versions because they really poorly balanced one certain element, and because of that, they decided to overbuff them. And when they overbuffed them, it became this kind of like this meta where if you don't have this character, don't play, or they just kick you out of the room. So it's like a very toxic meta. And yeah, and there's a lot of bad decisions from the game directors and stuff, and it was just like a downhill battle. And they tried everything they can to like recover the game, but it never got there.
Looking at more closely at the press release, it looks like that Dragalia Lost already has had all of its characters and story added. So basically, its content completely up until November 30th. They've already disabled real money purchases for the in-game currency. They will also gradually disable more features by removing purchases of like upgrades and things like that. So they're basically phasing it out in stages ahead of November 30th. But if you were ever at one point a player of Dragalia Lost, it seems like all of its story and characters have all been added, so you're free to enjoy those up until November 30th.
I mean, there were some other signs that you might expect the game to close down. Because, like, one of the versions, they said that, from now on, these characters are not part of the story, and they will not feature completely full voice acting. So that's for the Japanese version, because usually in the Japanese version, everything's fully voiced, right? So, people can kind of see the signs coming back in the day, but they keep saying, we'll assure you that, it's like nothing too major is happening. And there we go.
Well, I know that was a little bit of a shorter podcast, but that's basically everything I had listed for this week.
Have you
I don't know.
tried the, I was going to say, has anyone heard about NISA removing the zero front translation overlay?
I had heard from like through the grapevine a little bit there. I guess if you know the details, just go ahead and share. This is the spreadsheet translation of Kuro 2 or Kuro 1.
Yeah.
Zero Field not out yet.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah, Zero Field, not Zero Front, just to be clear.
Oh, I was going to say Zero. Did I say Zero Front? I said RIP. I was trying to say Zero Field.
Zero Field Chronicles.
But yeah, they yeah, so this basically confirms that NISA has the rights to Kuro, basically, right? I mean, you would tell someone to shut down, spreadsheet translation overlays.
Yeah. It's a rough situation, because I've seen plenty of people where it's like, yeah, they're within their legal rights to do this. And I think the best way to put it is the tweets I put out the other day where I just said, okay, look, I'm just going to say it. Calling folks impatient over trails might be true, but what's also true is even Utowaru Mono is getting day-and-date localizations, while Falcom is the only company where their games are delayed by 3 years for localization.
I have a question. So, like, the Korean and Chinese versions of Kuro 2 are coming out not day and date, but like a month later, like October, right?
It's clear that
do they get access to the scripts before it releases? I assume, like, there's no way they could.
They must be. But it sounds like it seems like NISA's either not getting them early, or because of like release cadence, they're just staggering things anyways. But
yeah,
it's like I like everyone's saying, oh, people are being like impatient. It's like, while that's true, 3 years is still really fucked up.
I mean, even stuff like we're talking about, like Trinity Trigger is going to come out next year, so it's not like day and date. Obviously, it's not a big franchise, but and it's not a big game, but still.
Specifically for the Trails series, next year, NIS America is releasing both Azure and Hajimari, right? Reverie.
And Nayuta.
So, like my devil's advocate is that I remember Adam on a previous episode.
Do you want to release them like 4 games in 1 year? Like, let's add Kuro as well. Like
the fastest they could get Kuro out would be 2024. And maybe 2025 for Kuro 2 at the fastest. I
just think I'm hoping that, after we get past this sort of backlog of the Crossbell games, that it can speed up. And I've said this before, like, let's just say they announce an East game, have someone else do it. Don't put more on NIS America's plate.
I would say that the best case scenario would be if Kuro's early 2024 and then Kuro 2 is late 2024.
Yeah, it almost seems kind of rushed that way, but that's like the only way they could do it to ever get caught up.
They're going to have to, if you want to catch up to a developer that's releasing a game every year, you're going to have more than a game a year, for a while.
No, but I was going to say, that reminded me, I remember a few weeks ago we talked about when we were expecting to hear about East 10. Was that Tokyo Game Show?
No, usually Falcom announces their games at their shareholder meeting in December. That's usually when they announce it.
Oh, okay. Because East 10, we've gotten a few snippets from Famitsu interviews. They're like, how about they're trying to change the formula up because they've been in the same one for the last few games. So I was just thinking about Tokyo Game Show and East 10 when we're expecting to see more on that.
The real nightmare might be if we get both East 10 and Kuro 3 in Japan next year. Because Falcom said that they're trying to release multiple games a year, and East 10 has been in development by basically a separate team within Falcom ever since East 9.
Yeah.
So, and obviously, whatever Kuro 3 is going to have, like, it's going to share the vast majority of assets with Kuro 1 and 2. So,
as for NIS America shutting down the spreadsheet, which is effectively a fan translation, I know it's this technically not because you patch it in yourself or whatever, but
can you?
I feel like. If you really wanted to get this, there's still places to find it.
Mm-hmm. All it does is just harms goodwill. And keep in mind, and this is something people are talking about, they did this the same day that that they charged for the Zero limited edition, a game that they bought the fan translation for from Geofront.
Did XSEED ever? I feel like no one cared about it back then, but did XSEED ever shut down the fan translations for East Origin or Xanadu Next? Because they licensed those, and like those official releases are based on fan translations. I don't know if people remember that.
They never.
I feel like
Sorry.
I feel like I should stress at this point. Just a reminder for folks: we do have people in RPG site staff who were involved with Geofront. Chow and I were not like involved monetarily. We just did beta testing for Zero, and I think I'm not sure. I didn't do Azure. Did you do Azure?
I tried it. It's like they gave me everything I needed. But I didn't really go through it because I was really busy at the time. But they provided me any resources I want if I needed to do this. If I want to correct my guides.
But basically, I just wanted to get it out there. It's like for example, like Colin Black, contributor for a site. He was paid for his work, whether or not it ends up being used.
And he's not he's not covering any NIS America games for.
Yeah,
we haven't set like a time limit, but for the foreseeable future, since he was paid by NIS America, so he's not going to cover anything.
Obviously I was not involved at all, but I did play the Geofront translations. But pretty soon after Azure came out, the Geofront translation of Azure, like NISA ended up making the announcement of the localization not long after that. It was like, if I remember right, wasn't it within like a couple weeks or a week? Like Azure came out and Azure came out, and then immediately Geofront had to like hide the public facing patch information because
it wasn't even so much hiding. They outright took it off the site. From what I understand, and I'm not sure how much it.
Sorry, I have a lot of thoughts in my head. I was just wondering, like, was there a lot of vitriol with NISA America when those got taken down too? Like, it just seems like this more recent thing with Kuro seems a lot more volatile for whatever reason.
Well, the thing with Kuro is way more volatile because, like, Crossbell, it's like, whatever, you're announcing a localization and whatnot, and people, if they want to, they can still find it. It's like, it was, like, some people were upset that it was delisted, but everyone knew that you could still get the patches if you wanted to. The thing with Kuro is that we're already going to be waiting 3 years for Hajimari or Reverie in the West. And Kuro is going to be similar, and Kuro 2 is likely going to be similar. So there are people right now that, like, no, I'll just say it. You can go on Steam, search Kuro no Kiseki. You can buy it for $50 from Clouded Leopard. And then there is a patch, even now, even though that the spreadsheet's been delisted, you can find a patch very easily to play that game in English. And if you wanted to support the official English release, which technically hasn't been announced yet, even though NISA has sent a takedown notice to the Zero Field translation group, you're going to be waiting for at least another 2 years.
Sorry if this is something I'm stuck on, but I just quickly searched for the Xanadu Next fan translation. It's on romhacking.net right now. Like, obviously, XSEED released that English. I'm just thinking, like, XSEED has also done this licensing fan translations before, but I don't know if they ever, like, did cease and desists or anything like that. They just licensed it and released it.
I don't think they care.
Right. Like, I mean, obviously, Xanadu Next, which is an excellent game, isn't going to be as big of a, of a title or of a sale, as, a Kiseki game, a Trails game, but still. Anyway.
This might be a dumb question, but do you think if NISA America formally announced that they were going to release Kuro to be announced 2024, and then did the cease and desist, would that have softened the blow, or would it have been still as equally annoying?
I think if it would have softened it, it would have been like very minimally. Like really, it's just like the cherry on top that they technically haven't even announced Kuro yet.
Yeah.
I feel like these patches are like they just keep the community together during the downtime, and they just chose to strike now as like a terrible PR move.
Yeah, and it's like, again, this is the same month that they're releasing the first game that they bought a fan translation for in the Trail series. It's like, I'll be honest, like, it's abundantly clear that the main reason this happened now is because of just a few days ago, there was the Steam top sellers list for July was made public, and Kuro was on it. And if you go to Kuro's PC like Steam page, you'll see that like about 20% of the reviews are in English, which going by conventional wisdom of like 50 sales per review generally, that's about 5,000 sales for people that bought like Kuro on PC specifically to use the translation patch, which it doesn't sound like a lot, but that's in less than a month.
That's money going to Clouded Leopard and not NAS America. So
yeah, that's like 5,000. Like even if those people were to double dip, like you can't assume that obviously. So it's like from NISA's standpoint, it's like, well, that's 5,000 lost sales already, and it's only going to increase from there. And I still think it was a terrible decision on their part. I can understand the thought process. I can still think that the decision was bad, but it's like I can understand where they came from. It's just like it's a terrible situation to be like a Trails fan in the West, and it's like
it's like
I will mention that when I posted I post every month. I post the schedule for that month's RPGs, and there was a lot of people. This is kind of funny. I posted it like literally hours before the takedown announcement or takedown became public, and people were really excited for Trails from Zero. Like, you know, a lot of responses on our social feed saying like, "Yes, I can finally play this" or whatever.
Well, I know we've already talked about.
And then like after the the takedown, then there was a bunch of like a follow up wave of tweets saying like, "Well, now I can't support this." Like, okay.
Well, I think we talked about this several times in the past, but like for Trails from Zero's official English release, I think Adam, you're the one we're counting on, at least from a podcast standpoint, because all the rest of us have either played it in Japanese or with the fan translation. Zero is really great. It might be my favorite in the series. So like trying to end this on a positive note, regardless of who is publishing it. Now.
I just feel terrible now because it's like the most immediate fallout like from this whole situation is that like obviously people are still going to be able to play Kuro in English if they want to, because like it's the internet, that shit doesn't go away. Right. But if there will be a Kuro 2 like fan translation spreadsheet, it probably won't be nearly as good and will probably take significantly longer, whereas the Kuro spreadsheet took like 5 months, I want to say.
It was like done really fast from what I heard.
So it's like I kind of feel terrible because it's like I'm really excited for Kuro 2. It's coming out this month in Japan. I already have it like pre-ordered. I don't want to talk about it anymore because I feel like with everyone that follows me, it'll just be like, yeah, you guys won't even be able to even play this with a spreadsheet translation now. You have to wait until 2025. And it's like, I don't want to feel that way.
Yeah, my friends are basically saying, oh, I'm not even going to play Kuro 2 now. It's like you just left me hanging in the middle of Arc because they were using that fan patch, and now you left me hanging. So it's like, who gives a fuck?
The one good news about that is that at least Kuro is like one of maybe two games in the series that does not end on a cliffhanger. So
yeah, it's self-contained. I mean, in Zero, if you beat Zero, it's pretty self-contained. If there was no Azure, it's like, yeah, that's a pretty good ending point as well. So I don't know. It's just a terrible situation in my opinion. I feel like I think they should have waited a little longer to do that takedown. But you know, it's like, is it even considered the legal territory? I mean, there's like guides and game facts that are translations of like video game works. It's like now it's like you're opening a whole can of worms.
I think when it comes to translations and people are paying money not for the translation but using it, I think that's where it gets tricky.
Like the thing is though, is that it was just like public facing like spreadsheets, and like they sent the not cease and desist. They sent the takedown like request to the spreadsheet, and it's like if your argument is, and it's probably a case of that what they really wanted to get at was the patches that were released anonymously on 4chan. And honestly, that's kind of like the thing that feels the shittiest is that like everyone knows that's the main reason why they wanted this shit like gone. And like the spreadsheets, even if it's a legal gray area, it's not like they're profiting off of this. It's not like they're doing anything morally wrong. It's like
that's probably the most frustrating thing is that no one's doing anything to be ashamed of or to be like guilty of here because they're still buying the game. Like it's just not going into the pockets of the English publisher who hasn't announced it. It's just
And another thing is that I want to say is that didn't Zero Field helped out some of the original like Geofront translation? Like there's some
I don't know about that, like any of the specifics there,
like,
but
I remember like certain parts of like early days of the translation patches, like they have some like the translation taken from it. I don't know. That's some of the things I heard. But if that's the case, it's like it's like aren't you just kind of like hitting where you started? It's like I don't know. I think NISA done completely a stupid move today, or not today, the last 2 days.
But yeah, it's like all my condolences to all my friends at Zero Field. They're all like very passionate people that were only doing what they thought would be best for the series in the West, which, I mean, it's just a shitty situation all around. I can't even really blame anyone that doesn't feel right supporting NISA after this, because while they're well within the rights, it's like, it still feels terrible. Because, like, I had like multiple friends that were playing through Kuro when the takedown thing dropped, and I had to find them like a backup of the spreadsheet so they could finish their playthrough. It's like they gave Falcon money. They were just playing the games that weren't officially announced for localization that, as far as we know, aren't going to be out for another 2 years at the least. And it's just, man, just all around doesn't feel good. Situation's not fun.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else we need to address, like from a site perspective on NISA America. I really don't think so. Like we're still obviously going to cover Trails from Zero. I forget who's slated to review that.
I'll just mention this one thing. Somebody wondering like if we were going to cover it on the site, and they were actually kind of like cynical about it. Like, oh, are you going to get blacklisted by NISA America? It's like, well, if you haven't been paying attention, we actually don't really cover a lot of like the Kuro Japanese like day-to-day news or week-to-week news on the site. Yeah. Honestly, because it's just so far out in English that we're just like, we'll wait. So I think James might put up like an op-ed maybe if he gets time for it. Sure. But like that's not the reason why we didn't like cover this as a news item. We just typically haven't covered Kuro 2 or even any Japanese Falcom stuff as a news item, not too much. We do like the big headlines, but that's about it.
Yeah. I mean, I did my features for Hajimari and Kuro, which were essentially unscored reviews. Let's be real here. But and I'll probably do it for Kuro too, but it's just one of those things where, like, especially after, like, and I know that my opinion on Cold Steel 4 is very much not the mainstream opinion on the game, and I get that. But especially after all of the vitriol I got for it, when I'm far from the only person that was disappointed by it.
I think the hardcore fans are more disappointed in it. Usually.
Yeah, but what I was going to say is that it's just like, it's been, especially with the long translation gap and the fact that I've been studying Japanese since 2015, so I can go through the games in Japanese. I've been going through the games in Japanese. I think I said when I finished Hajimari that I probably wasn't going to play a Trails game in English ever again. And it wasn't because it was out of spite or anything, but just because of the like situation where it's like, they're not going to get caught up by the time the series is like finished in Japanese. We're not going to have the final game in the series be a simultaneous release in like Japan and the West. And like, who knows what the wait's going to be, even if they start catching up by then, like a year and a half, 2 years. It's just, I don't know. It's just,
I just wanted to mention that, like, no, we are not worried about like getting blacklisted from NISA America. I mean, you gave it a 5. We're not scared of that.
I'm personally not afraid. I'm personally not afraid of that because I feel like they probably know that like this site is one of their best bets for Labyrinth of Galleria coverage specifically.
Yeah, that's true too.
Well, the nice thing about our site is that, if we don't get a review code, we just buy it ourselves and cover it. Like that's happened before. But also, if there's an omission of a news story, usually that only just speaks to the fact that we are an English-facing website and we cover primarily Western releases and press releases. Like for Kuro, I actually pulled up all of our coverage on it. We covered when it was announced, when it got a Japanese release date. We had a few Tetracasts when we linked to it because James had played it. James obviously wrote up his feature on it, which is kind of like an unofficial review, sort of, so to speak, an unscored review. And then we also talked about like release dates to the PC version of Kuro. And then obviously once it gets an English release, basically we don't have the bandwidth or just staffing power to cover the week-to-week marketing, like Adam said, of a Japanese-only release that hasn't been officially announced in English. So if there's an absence of talking about Kuro 2, that's kind of mostly all that dials back to.
Exactly.
Well, so yeah, we're still going to cover NISA America games, obviously with the caveat that James brought up earlier, that we are being open and transparent about those that did help with the GeoFront efforts, either as a contributor or a tester. And then, yeah, we are in several ways and to different extents fans of the series, just like our listeners. Like I played the GeoFront version of the Zero and Azure. I managed to get it from GeoFront before it was taken down officially because of NISA America. So like we are in the same boat in a lot of ways. I don't know if anyone on our staff or contributors were playing Kuro with the spreadsheet, but I wouldn't be surprised if someone was.
I think
Chow started, right?
Chow did, and I know Colin is going through it with the PC patch.
Oh, I went for the PC patch. The PC patch is solid, I would say.
Yeah.
Not everything's translated. Like the NPCs are, some are translated and some are not. But other than that, the game is completely functional. You can beat it to the end with the main story.
Did you finish it?
I didn't finish it, but from what I have seen, you can actually beat it to the end. They fix it. They update the patches like every single day. There are some caveats, like one of the chapters, because the spreadsheet uses that party. It only has translation if you use that party. So you use like a different party members. There's no translation on that. Like there are certain moments like that. But other than that, I think it's perfectly sourced. You can use it to like beat the whole game.
Yeah, and I think I saw like Scott was playing through it that way too. So it's like obviously like I was saying, the reason this probably happened is because the Kuro PC version being $50 and having a day one English patch that, while not perfect, is more than serviceable. And NISA America probably got really uncomfortable about that. End of the day, that's probably what happened.
Like I said, I don't think they should have done that. Like the fan base for fan translation, that group is like a very small community, and you're not really doing any sales. Like it won't not really hurt your sales in the long run. All it does is make you look bad by doing something like this. At least that's my take on it anyways.
So I'm going to ask a question that might make me look like an idiot. So obviously NISA America recently announced September 7th a NISA Showcase, which most people have, at least I won't say most people, a large number of people have been piling on, basically talking about their displeasure with the recent takedown. Do you think it's possible that we'll see Kuro announcement?
They leaked
they were
what
leaked.
they were going to announce. Unless for some... So basically what happened is, as soon as they announced this showcase, which is next week on the 7th, I believe, their storefront leaked the announced games. There was the new Void Terrarium, the Odin Sphere remaster,
it's Grim.
Sorry?
Grim Grimoire.
There's a murder mystery game, and then there's that Monster Meal survival strategy RPG. And Kuro wasn't listed on the site. Now maybe it's possible it'll come up, I guess, and it just wasn't on the site, but it doesn't seem like it. So those seem to be the games they're announcing. They might announce like a release date for Azure. I kind of expect Azure to be January, February, really early.
Well, because they've already released character spotlight trailers for Azure ahead of Zero coming out. So it seems like it's going to be kind of bang bang for Zero and Azure. Which
I'm guessing January, February.
Which, if we're going to get caught up, it needs to happen. I still think that getting Zero and Azure out in official English was, even though at the cost of delaying releasing other games, was probably the right move in the long run, rather than having those two be skipped. I don't know. Maybe they can't really judge that until we get to a point where things aren't so heated or volatile about reception.
I'm going to bring up a totally unrelated, well, not totally unrelated, but an NIS America related topic here. So they recently released the Prinny Presents Volume 3, which is Rhapsody and La Pucelle. And I think this is 3 for 3 with one of the games on the Switch version has apparently an unavoidable bug where it crashes.
Apparently the PC version also had that issue. It was just patched day one.
Oh, yeah. So it's just kind of how does this happen 3 in a row? I don't know if they aren't catching it or if they're catching it, but they're just not fixing it fast enough. It's just
forget about it.
That's not an aberration. That's a trend. So
Yeah, they have a bad track record online. People always give them shit about stuff that they did back in the day. Like, I thought maybe all those stuff has been over with, but I guess it still happens today.
Well, obviously, we'll report on, even though I guess it was leaked, anything that comes out of the NISA Showcase for next week on the podcast. And you've heard our honest thoughts on their takedown of the spreadsheet. Because in a lot of ways, we're fans of the series in different respects, just like our listeners. So it affects us in a lot of the same ways, especially when we have multiple contributors that were just planning on playing Kuro with the same spreadsheet that was taken down. So with that addendum at the very end of our podcast out of the way, I think it kind of covers us for what we're going to talk about. I think next week we'll get back into talking about more recent releases. Obviously, September looks like it's a pretty busy month with Valkyrie Elysium, Dio Field, Trails from Zero, a few other like
Voice of Cards.
Yeah, Voice of Cards is now in there,
Oh,
Steel
yeah.
Rising, and a lot of those indie games that we talked about, like The Outbound Ghost and things like that. So September is surprisingly pretty deep, and I don't think it's going to let up from there. So we had this little bit of a gap week here, which maybe is good that we can get Josh back to discuss some of the other games as we go into September. I think he had been playing a little bit of the Made in Abyss game, so which I always forget the subtitle of that Made in Abyss game.
Binary Star Falling into Darkness.
There you go. Yeah, so maybe we'll get him back next week to talk about that. Hopefully he gets his computer back on together. But yeah, go ahead and go to the website to see James's 2 features for Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak and Final Fantasy XIV patch 6.2. We also do have the news posts from Kite Steinbuck that detail all of the streaming dates for Tokyo Game Show for both Square Enix and some of the other publishers that have some JRPG or JRPG adjacent titles going to be detailed. So it's still a couple weeks away for that, so won't be any new news on that for next week, but the week after will be Tokyo Game Show, and we'll follow up on anything that comes out of there. And then, of course, all the other news for all the other release dates are up on the site. You can find RPG site on all the social media platforms on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. You can go to our Discord, discord.gg/RPG site. If you do listen to this podcast and you enjoy it, go ahead and leave us a review. Leave us an honest review, and we love reading those whenever we get them. So let us know what you think and what we can do better and what we're doing great. Hopefully there's at least something we're doing great. And you'll hear from us next time. So until then, stay safe and take care. We'll talk to you later.